Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Graying Jedi podcast. I am UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, Lord Uther, and from the Force Void Beyond, Jedi Master Psyllium Maas. Gentlemen, welcome back to the
Greetings.
Council Chambers. We are beyond Andor, revisiting Rogue One, the Star Wars story nobody was asking for, but everybody was very glad to get after they saw it, because the lead in to A New Hope was something that I don't think anybody expected to be a smashing success, except maybe everybody involved in the project. And now, of course, we have the backstory of Andor to support this film and really give us that context that turns this story from a poignant story to that much more of a poignant story. And gentlemen, I want to start there. Now that we know what Cassian Andor went through and what he left behind as part of the rebellion, how do you feel about Rogue One? Jedi Master Psyllium Maas, what do the Force Ghosts tell you in that void beyond?
Thank you, Graying Jedi fans and my fellow council members. A tiny bit of just setting the foundational stage for Rogue One, and then we'll get into thoughts. It was released on December 16th, which was the Walt Disney Company's preferred Star Wars landing stripe for the prequel trilogy and Rogue One. The only one they released in the summer corridor was Solo: A Star Wars Story, which we will cover on a future Graying Jedi podcast. Be sure to tune in and watch for that. And so it comes out right before Christmas. It's directed by Gareth Edwards, although there's a little bit of a asterisk on that. It was written by Chris Weitz, who gave us About a Boy, and Tony Gilroy, whom we will discuss very soon, with a story by John Knoll. Now, John Knoll was the visual effects supervisor for the prequel trilogy. So he oversaw the ILM effects for The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith. So he's walking around the office one day, and he buttonholed one of Kathleen Kennedy's lieutenants and said, "Hey, I've got an idea. You know that crawl we do in the beginning of episode 4? What if we made that a movie?" And the woman snapped her fingers. I mean, this is almost literally how it happened. She said, "You got to go pitch that to Kathy right now." They go upstairs to Kathleen Kennedy's office. He says the exact same thing to her, and like the light bulb goes off. She says, "We're making that movie." So he already had a great day job, and then he pitches like a Star Wars movie in 30 seconds. It's just very frustrating to those people who don't dine in the commissary. You're like, does this guy really get to, now he's got a story credit? Anyways, he knew better than to try to write it himself, so they turned it over to a whole tag team of writers. Everyone by now knows what happened with Rogue One. Gareth Edwards, hot off of the 2014 release Godzilla, was hired as the director. I went to the 2015 Star Wars celebration in Anaheim, where they rolled out Gareth Edwards and some of his pre-production sketches, and this was before any footage had been shot, and he was talking up, this is going to be a war movie, this is going to be the rebellion as you've never seen it before, and et cetera, et cetera. And then they announced a hot, good-looking cast, including Felicity Jones, Diego Luna, Ben Mendelsohn. I mean, everyone was riding high. And then I guess Gareth Edwards, whatever his cut that he turned in after, months of shooting and costly effects and everything else, it just wasn't working for the brain trust. And it wasn't like well, we need to tweak here, we need to tweak there. Like, apparently the film was in fairly dire straits from their point of view, a certain point of view. So Tony Gilroy, as we've discussed with his stewardship of the Andor television series, this is when he first joined the franchise, kind of as an emergency medical technician. He had a great reputation for the Bourne Identity films. He'd done other films, Duplicity with Clive Owen and Julia Roberts. He'd written the script Beirut, which ended up starring John Hamm, which was very well received in the industry. And they said, "Hey, can you help us? Can you maybe do a few weeks of research, of reshoots? Write a couple new scenes. Try and help us get this movie to where we can release it and be happy with it." He took the gig. Again, he said he had zero loyalty, interest in Star Wars, but this was something they basically begged him to help, and they did almost 6 or 7 weeks of reshoots, which in Hollywood is a lot. Usually when you're doing little pickups and things like that, it might be a week, it might be 2 weeks. This was almost half of a production schedule for a new movie. So he went in from the ground up. I mean, he cut subplots, he added subplots, he added new scenes in the beginning, he changed how the heist was performed on Scarif. This was serious work. They couldn't give him a co-directing credit due to Directors Guild rules. Gareth Edwards' name is still what appears, but please don't fool yourselves, Star Wars fans, etc. The movie you're seeing is what Tony Gilroy's vision ultimately ended up becoming. And they did award him a writing credit. And think about that. The guy got a screenplay credit just for doing whatever rewrites he did after the movie was finished. Don't forget, the movie was finished in one sense, but it really wasn't at all. So Rogue One, they call those, may have had a slight troubled production history. And usually those don't end well at the box office because everyone's like, oh, I see they just slapped this together. I can see where the chewing gum and baling wire are holding it, And what was remarkable was the fans embraced it. It made $1 billion worldwide, and it's probably one of the most celebrated of the Disney releases on the big screen to date. And again, you can put that all on the feet of Tony Gilroy, who basically said, we're going to do it this way instead of the way that you did it. And, Gareth Edwards goes on and he, is still directing. In fact, he's got Jurassic World Rebirth coming out in a month, for Universal Pictures. So your assessment of his abilities, from Godzilla 2014 to now, that's you're perfectly free to make those assessments. But this, make no mistake, Tony Gilroy came in and resuscitated this and gave it new life and gave it a new hope. And that's what led to Andor and all of its brilliance. Now, having seen Rogue One both before Andor and now after, I have to say, they did a remarkable job of Andor of putting meat on bones and giving substance and style and all of those things we raved about, mature writing and deep characters and so forth. And the thing that Rogue One, I don't think it takes away from it, but I think that what's clearly noticed is that's not the story that they were telling in 2016. They were telling Jyn Erso. And Cassian is relegated to second fiddle by the nature of the storytelling, and that's not a bad thing. But all of those great characters, Clea, and all of these characters that are still surviving by the time Rogue One begins, we don't ever get to see them or hear from them or know them because they hadn't been invented yet, basically. So we're on Jyn Erso's path. Cassian is a smaller player in that. And each scene that he's in is deeper because we've seen the show and we know what he's all about. But obviously you can't give him that space and that emotional shading because, again, they were still working that out years later when they decided to launch this prequel to a prequel. So that stands out. We're following a whole different cast of characters, and they're just as compelling. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, having Donnie Yen, I am one with the Force is with me. Having Forrest Whitaker, again, more Saw Gerrera. We finally find the fate of Saw. Spending time with Mads Mikkelsen, spending time with C2, K2SO. It's a fantastic ensemble, and it works on so many levels. together. And it also, I think we mentioned this off camera, it's still the true Star Wars story that just has an inherently unhappy ending, despite Princess Leia telling us that hope has been delivered. Between Vader's massacre of the rebel troops, and it just escapes his fingers as the blockade runner, makes its way through hyperspace towards Tatooine, to our heroes, again, Cassian Andor, just waiting for the cataclysm to envelop them after they've successfully uploaded the Death Star plans from Scarif. Like, it's a downer. And I remember coming out of it with, I don't say it's bittersweet, because I know I love the movie, but I just had never been in the George Lucas Star Wars or the J.J. Abrams Force Awakens. J.J. Abrams Force Awakens ends on a potential cliffhanger. I found Luke Skywalker. I'm going to give him his lightsaber. Is he going to take it? Like, that was sort of an edge of your seat, like, what's going to happen? But this was different. This was, these people sacrificed themselves for the rebellion, and we are just sort of getting to know them. I mean, imagine if this movie had come out post Andor and we knew of Cassian's heroism and his character journey, and then to see him perish on the beach. I mean, that there wouldn't have been a dry eye in the house. And I think what held us back from displaying that emotion fully the first time we saw it is because we only got to know these characters for 2.25 hours, and then they were lost to us. We were going to pick up the Skywalker story and Han Solo and Ben Kenobi en masse, but now seeing it's wrenching, and it's deep. And I'll finish with this and turn it over to the council. The final battle on Scarif, and I don't just mean on the ground, which is as impressive as anything in The Empire Strikes Back with the assault on Hoth and what have you. The sky battle, trying to get that shield down, like some of Star Wars' best aerial combat, and strategy, and like, we have to get this thing down somehow. Use the Corvette, the Hammerhead Corvette, with the Star Destroyer. Like, that sequence probably goes on 44 minutes. I mean, it's literally almost the entire third act of the film, and you've got stuff on the ground and soldiers being pinned down and everything else, plus the heist. There is a lot of business going on at that climax, and it just kind of overwhelms you, even on the small screen, and even 9 years later. There's just a lot, and I give Tony Gilroy credit, not as a Star Wars acolyte, but as somebody who understands the drama of the situation, and he really captured that. Again, with Gareth Edwards' contributions notwithstanding, like, that ending, you're just digging your fingers into your couch, into the arms of your couch, like, how are they going to get out of this, even if you know how they're going to get out of this? So that's my feeling. It certainly raised the emotional stakes now with Cassian. The thing is that we spent the movie with other characters who, again, I would have spent happily with more Donnie Yen, or so forth, or more Alan Tudyk. Seeing K2SO go down is a gut wrencher. So more emotion, I think. I think that's what this delivered.
Quick question to both of you. Then I'm going to make 2 points, I think. Does the hate that Kathleen Kennedy get, is it fair? Because I think there's a ton of hate online for her. And now after what you just said, I'm kind of thinking about that a little bit. So what are your guys' opinion on that?
Well, I guess the question is, okay, there were at least three, because the Rise of Skywalker, they fired Colin Trevorrow before he started, and that's how they got JJ back to do the third one. 3 of the Disney prequel films under her watch had post-production or mid-production shakeups, right? Solo was Phil Lord and Chris Miller doing sort of a wise-ass take on Star Wars, and they said, no, this is too far from the formula, and they went ahead and replaced them with Ron Howard, who delivered, like he did with Willow for Lucasfilm, a very satisfying, representational, and we'll talk about Solo when it comes, but Ron Howard knew the assignment and delivered point blank. But all of the production woes behind the scenes were everywhere on the internet and so forth. Rise of Skywalker, we said they had to fire the director and replace him. And this one, Tony Gilroy coming in. So I think what people's perceptions were was, oh, well, she can't run a tight ship. It's not like Marvel was cranking them out during the Infinity War saga where every director, every screenwriter was on point and on message and all of that. And maybe it's just the messiness of Star Wars to a degree that they want to be very democratic. They want to have different points of view. That's how we get Skeleton Crew in streaming. That's how we get The Acolyte. That's how we get Andor. That's how we get The Mandalorian. Like, I've always thought if you could bring more voices into the room, more cooks into the kitchen, not constantly fighting over each other, but like if you can get a different point of view, then you're only deepening your franchise. Star Wars would be a very different place without any of Tony Gilroy's contributions. I think we can agree on that. But Star Wars is not just Tony Gilroy, just like it's not just George Lucas. So I think Kathy Kennedy takes a lot of fire from the passionate internet base that supports Star Wars, because if it didn't align with their vision or they just weren't entertained, I think just like a quarterback on an NFL team, I think she's the first one that's going to draw flack from all of that. If you actually look at the numbers, if you actually look at the marketing that Disney has done for this franchise with their cooperation, if you look at all of those metrics, she has done as good a job as you could possibly do, having to replace George Lucas, who was a singular auteur. Every decision of Star Wars before this was made by George Lucas. You know, what novels are we publishing? What comic books? What T-shirts? What, like, the man ultimately, if he didn't like it, it didn't happen. And that worked for the original trilogy. It worked for the prequels. And then he just said, you know what? I don't need to do this anymore. He sold his creation to Disney. They took the baton and went running with all of their marketing might and muscle and global reach. And like I say, Kathleen Kennedy, she's been a producer on Steven Spielberg films for decades. She worked on the Indiana Jones. She worked on E.T. She's not like, oh, I was just a secretary 2 weeks ago and they promoted me. Like, she knows instinctively what would make a box office hit, you know, for a franchise like that. And maybe all the choices didn't pan out, and we'll, you know, discuss that in the sequel trilogy. And I respect that people have differences of opinion on those. But I think a lot of the attack on her, I think, is just sort of a, you know, she's a lightning rod. She's the one in charge right now. They're talking about doing a co-presidency when she steps down. Perhaps Dave Filoni and Carrie Beck. Carrie Beck is a Kathleen Kennedy lieutenant who has been there with the streaming shows, the animation, and so forth. We all know Dave Filoni, his fidelity to George Lucas's original vision of what the franchise can be, and his embrace of the mythology and so on, coming his start. So they should be in good hands even when she steps down. But first and foremost, she's a producer with decades of credits, decades of experience, and I don't think she tarnished the franchise with her choices or all that. Some of them didn't work for, you know, in some people, and that's part of movie making. Marvel was going through a little bit of a hitch post Infinity War, and I mean that's another conversation entirely. You know, you don't always bat 1,000, but I think she has. I don't think she has disrespected or somehow dishonored the franchise with her stewardship. I think she's done a great job. That's, I mean, my opinion.
Urza?
I'm going to distill that down, and I'm going to give less nuance, but I'm also going to give this disclaimer that I'm about to use some colorful language. So everybody out there, please understand this is my opinion, and that if you want to mute the next part to avoid some colorful language, now is the time. There are a bunch of fucking malcontents on the internet, and I'm sick of the hate for Kathleen Kennedy. She's done a fine job. Has everything been a knockout of the park? Of course not. There's no such thing as perfection. I'm sorry. Star Wars is great. Every single movie they've done is fantastic in its own right. That being said, some I don't like as much. Some I don't really care for at all. But They've done a great job. They're continuing a franchise that I love. There are a lot of people out there who say, we don't need this. We don't need more Star Wars. Let's do something different. Fuck you. I don't care. We need more Star Wars because there are kids these days that have never seen the original trilogy and are not going to sit through that kind of cinema. They're just not. And there's not going to be a passion there. Now, when they get older, they might appreciate it, but kids are the future. They need something on their level that they enjoy. And we should find appreciation in that, whether we care for it or not. Because, like Psyllium Maas said, to be honest, you need that diversity of thought. Enough said. If there was a singular Star Wars vision and that's all we had, we would be worse for it. So that's all I got to say about Kathleen Kennedy. Lord Uther, you said you had some more points.
Oh, next point. Next point. So this is my Star Wars, Star Trek point here. In Star Trek, the one thing I like about Star Trek, and we brought this up in another podcast, the Warp Core, which you should subscribe to. The one thing I've always liked about that is they try and get science-y, and they try and link everything together, and they make a history of it, right? Like they very carefully go back and make sure that everything aligns. That's one thing I like about Star Trek, and I brought this up before. Star Wars, the one thing I've liked is we didn't always get answers to things. We just kind of left a mythology out there. Like the Force used to be this thing. Is it magic? Could it be some science? Beautiful right there. What can it be? And things at first didn't always link together, right? So I was thinking about this the other day, about how Andor is this now stream that all connects, right? Andor to Rogue One to one of the greatest scenes ever in cinema, in my opinion. At the end, we get, and we've said this a lot, the Darth Vader that we wanted to see, and we need to see more of. And then that goes right into A New Hope. And let's not talk about 8 and 9 because those don't exist in this dojo. But I was struggling with, do I want to know all of that history, right? Do I want it all to connect? And I feel like they knock it out of the park, and I like the connection and the history that is there when I thought I was going to struggle with it a lot. So that's just a point. If you want to jump in on that, to you.
I'll jump in on that because I agree. And this is where I say that, for those out there who didn't want more Star Wars or wanted it to be preserved for what it was, and, they don't care about the Obi-Wans, they don't care about the Rogue Ones or the Solos. Look, I get it. I get the skepticism, but now that you've seen Andor, you have everything in the opposite direction, where this was possibly the best cohesive storyline we've had in a very long time that tells the story that we needed to know to establish the rebellion. Honestly, if you look without the nostalgia at A New Hope, why are they struggling against the Empire? Is the Empire really particularly that evil? We're told they are, but we're never shown that they are. And that is something that I didn't realize I struggled with the original trilogy. If you don't have Darth Vader and the Emperor, what is the Empire? Really, truly. They're ordered to go after these droids. All we know is there's some sort of an insurrection going on. Think about insurrections in real life. We don't know the full story. We don't know who's good and evil. You really don't know. You have to trust the mysticism. Now you have a very venerable storyline that can illustrate, to a certain degree, the true evil of the Empire. And not just from the perspective of a rebellion, from somebody who doesn't want to be involved at all, who becomes a rebel, and then a martyr. You also get an Imperial who's bought hook, line, and sinker in Cyril, who becomes a rebel in his last moments, really. And then you get the Imperial who's diehard till the end, who gets punished by their own system, again underscoring the true evil of the Empire. Those are stories that without it, honestly, look at the 4, 5, and 6. Honestly, tell me that you can paint the Empire as purely evil without Darth Vader and the Emperor. Truthfully. Moff Tarkin and the Death Star, okay, sure, those are bad. But does not every Empire have giant weapons of mass destruction? There you go. Now you have a better picture.
Agreed.
Okay. Did you want to jump on that Gold Rush? You want me to make my last point?
No, go make your last point.
To go back to what UrzaMaster said earlier, if you don't like Solo, you suck. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Because that, and I'm going to bring something else up about Solo. I think it's a beautiful take on it. I just think everything about it is wonderful. I think it was marketed wrong. I think that's an issue. I would have paid money to have seen the Darth Maul part of it when he takes over. Was it the Crimson
Dawn. Crimson Dawn.
To see him run that? I think that was a beautiful spin-off for him, and I would have loved to have seen that. And let Han Solo run into him again, or so. I think they could have done something with that. The hate for Solo is just so misappropriated. Go ahead.
This might make you excited then. At Celebration, Star Wars Celebration in Japan, whatever the next animated project is to be, and we don't have enough details yet, it is an animated Darth Maul series, and I suspect that will cover some of this Crimson Dawn when he was running a crime syndicate after his bisection in The Phantom Menace. Now, if you've watched the Dave Filoni animated, you've seen Maul resurrected, so that fills in those gaps for you Maul fans. And if you've seen Star Wars Rebels, which of course was the lead into Ahsoka, which is currently shooting season 2 right now, in Rebels we found the final fate of Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi as they are intertwined. So, but this animated series would kind of take a step back and maybe give us Maul. I'm hoping, like in Andor, like we don't get I don't think they would bother if it was a one-dimensional, the Force, the Jedi must be destroyed, blah, blah, blah. I think we might get a somewhat conflicted, and maybe adding some more of those shadings we just talked about with Andor and Cyril and Dedra. I'm looking forward to it because, like I say, we've already seen Darth Maul swings a double-bladed lightsaber and he's mean, but this with an animated show with good writing and Filoni kind of keeping an eye on things from a distance, I think this could be really good. It's not due to come out for another year or two, so we'll have to hold our breath and wait patiently. But I think, just like you say, your wish may come true in that we get to cover some of that ground, and like I say, a deeper picture of this former apprentice turned crime lord.
I know we're kind of spinning off a little bit here, which who cares? Because why not? Do you want to see the live action Ben Kenobi taking out Darth Maul? Because that kind of leads me to, would I want to see a Darth Maul series where part of what his overall scheme is he wants to find Kenobi? And could you pit that against Vader, who's doing the same search? And could you have Vader and Maul run into each other going after Kenobi and let them duel it out at some point where maybe they do some damage to each other, and then somehow Maul obviously finds Kenobi, and then I guess I'm asking a couple of things here. Do you want to see a Maul Kenobi? Do you want to see that live? Because we know we know what the end result is gonna be, and we know how the battle goes. But do you want to see Ewan McGregor and Ray Park or whoever they would have play Maul go at it? And would you want to see this parallel hunting down of Kenobi with Vader and Maul kind of having the same? Because when we're watching Kenobi, right, that's part of Vader's overall almost like side quest that that Palpatine really doesn't seem to want him to do, right? But it's like this quest for him that he feels like he's got to do that. So I'm asking a lot of things, Urza. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. That was actually going to be a point I was going to raise, is Obi-Wan Season 2. It's written right there. And I do think you could have Vader hunting down Jedi runs across Maul, and I could see those two running into conflict. And like with most crime lords, the Empire's fine with them, right? So I could see that being that one notional twist where that's where you could get the conflicted Darth Maul, who's like, I got abandoned by Darth Sidious. You know, my hatred for Ben Kenobi basically let me come back and do whatever it is I'm doing now. And, you know, his quest is now hunting Kenobi and maybe finding Luke on Tatooine, and that could wrap into it. He doesn't know who Luke is. He doesn't know the importance of the boy, but he knows Ben Kenobi's there watching over him. There's your weak spot. That's how those two come into conflict. Another kidnap story, maybe. And it could be routed through bounty hunters or whatever, you know, crime lords that he's working with. And then Vader could be just this almost cameo character. That could be your episode 4 or 5 in a 6-8 episode arc, where those two end up in direct conflict with each other, and Vader's like, well, you know, it doesn't even have to be a stalemate. He could have him at the throat and say, stay out of my way, and then just leave him, because the Empire doesn't give a shit about crime lords, but he's a Force user. Vader might come across him on the pretense of, like, there's a Force user, could be a Jedi, we're not sure, blah, blah, blah. We finally get that confrontation, which we talk about dream matchups all the time, right? There's your Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan. Darth Vader, and, like, the reason we get Darth Vader, right? Darth Maul, like, those two in combat. And then, you know, that could be where Obi-Wan defeats some, you know, blaster-wielding super bounty hunter, maybe with a young Ben Solo's help, or maybe with the young Chewbacca's help, because we know Ben. Did I say Ben? Not Ben Solo, Han Solo. Whew. It's early, right? Han Solo's help, you know, indirectly. Like Han Solo's running a smuggle route, maybe, you know, adjacent to Crimson Dawn, and coming into conflict with somebody who's got Luke in the back of their ship, and that's what they're smuggling. And then, you know, maybe they sort of indirectly help Obi-Wan. And that's just sort of your cursory, they don't know about each other, helping each other. I think it'd be a fantastic story. I'd watch that, for sure.
Checking the Jedi archives, it is called Maul Shadow Lord, and it is set for 2026. Now, again, these things will change. Animation, you usually want to have a few under your belt because of the cost. So they're saying it could be a 12 episode, which would give you quite, I mean, at 20 to 30 minute episodes a chop, which is what Rebels and the Clone Wars and Bad Batch were. I mean, that's a not insignificant amount of content that they could do all sorts of things. And plus, the beauty of animation, as we just talked about, you don't need, you can just get Katie Sackhoff to do a voice, or you can get, you know, these people, they don't have to be on set sweating and doing all of these things. You can really go to town. There are some great freeing limitations in this, and you can have an animated Vader, for example. Like this showdown, you say, as much as we'd love to see it live action, it might even be more practical and even cooler realization as an animation, because then all you really need is to get to recreate James Earl Jones's horse breathing, and then you've got it there. So something to look forward to, Graying Jedi fans, next year. Maul Shadow Lord, right now, you know, they're animating it. They have no release date, nothing. But that plus a big screen Mandalorian Grogu and a season 2 of Ahsoka. And I mean, can I just close my eyes and wake up in 2026? Because for Star Wars fans, this is fairly fertile ground.
I'm going to ask you one more question, and then we can close this out. We're talking a lot about animation. Do you want to see even a little bit of a mini-series where we get the voices of Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, and you can do a couple of Han Solo things, you can do a couple of Luke Skywalker things, and use the actual voices, or do you, or are we scrapping the whole Han Solo, Luke Skywalker thing. It's done. It's over. There's nothing else there. We move on.
I think, just real quick, I think for me, I think the actors, I think recently Mark Hamill said, yeah, I don't think I'll be coming back, which, again, if they gave him enough money, who knows.
He would
But
come back.
yes,
Yeah.
I think, and he was very good in The Life of Chuck, by the way, Star Wars fans, if you want to see him in a Stephen King adaptation, go and see that in theaters now. We talk about diversity of thought, we talk about all of that, and we've talked about, can we move beyond the Skywalker saga? Hey, I love those legacy characters, and whether they show up in books or comic books or animation or wherever, I'm never going to turn down a glimpse of 3PO and R2 and Yoda and everybody else. I love them. I just do. But in the same breath, I mean, I think the comic books have now moved into the New Republic era. You have Mandalorian and Ahsoka still very much in the Thrawn New Republic era. I think that's where the storytelling is aiming, as well as going off in completely different reshoots. I know that James Mangold, who gave us both Indiana Jones, Dial of Destiny, and A Complete Unknown with Bob Dylan, I know his take, he's doing the Dawn of the Force, and that's, millions of years before any of this that we're seeing. I know he's working on that with Andor writer Bo Willimon. So that's a completely different take. I know you've got the Ryan Gosling project, Starfighter. You've got the Rey, rebuilding the Jedi Like, I think the sequel trilogy and the New Republic era are kind of right now where their glimpses are. So I don't know if there's as much room for those legacy characters. But boy, animation, hey, they already did it in the holiday special, right? Like, it's kind of fun to watch that 1978 animation style, or I think it was 78, yeah. I mean, that's Harrison Ford, that's Mark Hamill, there's no doubting it. Lending their voice, that's Anthony Daniels. So, is there precedent? You bet. But in the same breath, like, let's see what this Thrawn storyline takes us, and let's see where maybe some of these new characters, Ahsoka and so forth. Let's see where they go.
I tend to agree. I think we're moving in other directions. I would love to see more legacy stuff, but there's always going to be room for it too. And with AI voices now, I mean, you could really do this at any time in animation in the future. Or just generate the image of the person. I'm okay with it. I know a lot of people are against that, and really, honestly, even in Rogue One, looking at Carrie Fisher's CGI wasn't great. Obviously, the technology gets better every year by leaps and bounds, so it's in a good place. And like I said with Kathleen Kennedy, she gets a lot of untoward hate for no reason. And I think a lot of people are just malcontent because they are protective of what they grew up with. And I get that. But embrace it, because there's a lot of really entertaining stuff coming that, look, if they made a Goonies 2 now, like a follow-up,
There's talk of it.
40th anniversary was just yesterday or the day before. Look, I'm going to be highly skeptical. My wife might hate it, but it could be very good. And that's the thing, is just like you can't come into this with that heavy bias. You're not always going to get a hit. You're not always going to, get an Andor. You're not always going to get a episode 10. It's just going to be, or episode 9, excuse me. But there could be good stories left to tell, and that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of a continued franchise. That's why I love Strange New Worlds and the idea of a Star Trek legacy. And if y'all tune in here on Pending Rebrand as a subscriber, get access to that Warp Core podcast. Stay with us on the Graying Jedi podcast. All our other shows, totally free, by the way. It's free to subscribe, free to share to your friends. We are here not always to yell at you. I apologize if I offended anybody earlier, but just don't be so cynical. It's okay to enjoy things. Lord Uther, final point.
Oh, yes. That's
Thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to get Lord Uther on the spot there. Again, from the Graying Jedi Council, we appreciate all of your time. Thank you for joining us for Rogue One. We'll join you again in the future with who knows what the next Star Wars story will be. Until then, may the Force be with you. Always.